welcome back. Jared Lintner, Tackle Warehouse Pro, and we're going to continue with the season recap. This week we're going to start off with Smith Mountain Lake. Pretty much, going into it, we've been there 3 or 4 times in a row now, and it's always been kind of a sight fishing dominated tournament. And Skeet, being Skeet, took it upon himself to pretty much change the way that lake fishes now. And Jerry Rego came out with a SKT swim bait, and this is the light hitch. This is the exact one that Skeet was throwing at Smith Mountain. Basically, he was just covering water on long flat points where those pre-spawn as well as post-spawn fish were staging, and he pretty much won the tournament. And after the first couple of days, I mean, he was on the right deal. Everybody else was on the spawning flats looking for those spawners, and he was catching the big ones that were coming and going. So this proved to be a dominant bait, and it's going to continue to be that way. And when things kind of slowed down for him, he was throwing just a Berkeley sink worm on a Trocar drop shot hook, and he's bringing it weedless, or wacky style, and pitching around docks or wood or whatever kind of structure there was in the areas he was throwing that swim bait. So with that 1-2 punch, he pretty much dominated the tournament. And we'll see what happens this year. I'm sure it's going to be another sight fishing swim bait deal. So at Smith Mountain, I was kind of along with the sight fishing thing. When the fish go on the beds, I kind of get excited, and that's all I want to do. But in the mornings and sometimes in the shade lines, I was throwing this new bait. It's kind of modeled off the Vixen. It's the Repo Man by Paycheck. And I was just, like I said, in the mornings I was covering water with this, and I was getting some good bites on it. And then in the afternoon, when the shade line's on the lake, I was pulling some of those fish up off the beds with that color right there. It's in real clear water. It's the deal. And then as far as sight fishing, what I was doing, I was just throwing this brush hog, baby brush hog, and that green pumpkin color. I normally throw white or something bright that I can see, but it seemed like the fish were real hesitant about that. So that green pumpkin baby brush hog, I mean, it didn't take me that long to catch those fish that were spawning. And something else that was kind of cool is this Daiichi hook. I was throwing 20-pound line, and this little X point on there, I cannot bend that hook out with even 20-pound test and a flipping stick. So that really helped me put a lot of those fish in the boat, and they were like deep in the pine trees and stuff. So you really have to use heavy line and, like I said, the flipping stick. And without that hook right there, I guarantee I would have bent some hooks out and lost some fish. So I was just using a 3/16 tungsten too, and that helped me detect bites as well as visibly seeing them, because like I said, sometimes they're in that tree. You cannot see those bites, or you cannot see the fish eat the bait, so you have to feel for them. And also, when I was coming to some of those other trees, I was just flipping the watermelon red brush hog, the baby brush hog, and catching several fish doing that. So that was the way I was approaching that tournament. Then we went over to Pickwick, where Kevin Short basically took the biggest, most popular creek on the lake and dominated it with a little shallow running crankbait. He was throwing the WEC. It's a homemade balsa crankbait, he was just throwing around cypress trees, getting reaction bites. And I mean, I fished in there the first day of the tournament, and there was probably 30-40 boats in there, and he caught more fish than everybody, with that little crankbait, making pinpoint cast, covering water. But at the same time, when he had a tree or a piece of structure that seemed like there was a fish on it, he kept making repeated casts until he had triggered those fish to bite. So whereas other people would kind of blow by. So when it comes to square bill fishing, throwing shallow crankbaits, he's probably the best at it. This here is a bomber. It's the closest thing tackle has to his bait. Those baits that he's fishing, handcrafted, like I said, but you don't have to have those necessarily. These little square bill fat body crankbaits, they will do pretty much the same. So when it gets that time of year, when the fish are kind of post spawn, and you got a lot of structure, that's the bait you want to be throwing around, especially in the dirtier water. At Pickwick, I've seen how many boats were fishing in these creeks, and everybody's flipping, throwing crankbaits, throwing spinnerbaits. And I was getting bites too. I was flipping the alimony punch skirt with a penetration beaver on it, you know, I was getting a ton of bites, but like I said, there's a lot of boats. So I basically went out to the main river and I found a couple little humps with some river channels that were coming off spawning flats, and I was catching fish that were coming and going. And the first bait I was throwing was just this little fat-free shad, citrus shad in color, making long casts, and I was getting quite a few bites. But when they weren't pulling water, I would back off on those same areas and throw this is a Jewel football head jig, 5/8 ounce, and I was throwing a green pumpkin chigger craw on it, and I was catching a ton of fish. I mean, it was a really fun event. And you know, when I beat them up on the football jig, I'd pick up a 10-inch blue flake power worm and go back down the same little areas and just smoke them. So they were really fun events. Both of them were, you know, the fishing was really good. I'm looking forward to getting back to them. And but check back next week. We're going to talk about Gunnersville and Clarks Hill Lake.